So don't start. But if you did, you can always do better than you're doing, and you certainly can do better than you did in your past, or at least that's what they tell me. So really, when it comes to sleep deprivation, I spent many all-nighters. I wouldn't talk about sleep so much if I didn't have challenges with sleep. I mean, for a long time, I slept like a bulldog. I would sleep anywhere, anytime. By the way, folks, if you ever walk down the street and you see a bulldog and you stop, you'll notice they always stop. They always seem so friendly. They always stop. They always stop, and they look up at you, and you pet them. And the reason they seem to like you so much is because they love to stop. I owned one. They're all about the stopping. It's not you. It's about the stopping. Anyway, the goal is not necessarily to sleep as much as a bulldog. Actually, it's the only animal, see, can't help myself. It's the only animal for which there's a genetically induced apnea. They're brachycephalic, which means they have a short snout. They got all those folds. You know why the folds are there? The folds are there because they have a genetic mutation. They bred out the pain receptors in the face because they used to have them they would bull bait. They bite on the face of the bull. They kill all the pain. They bred out the pain receptors, gave them a floppy face, short snout. English bulldog, thank you for the specificity. A biologist loves the specificity. The Frenchies are pretty cool. They have a little more kick in them, right? The bulldogs, a little less, and Costello was a bulldog mastiff, so he was sort of more or less like a sea turtle, just slow movement, stopping, and he's going forward, and you can move aside. Or, in fact, Costello was so mellow that when he would lie down on the floor, I had one of those, kind of robot vacuums things, we called a Roomba in our country. It would come up to his face, and it would bounce off his nose, and he wouldn't even take the opportunity to blink. The bulldog is sort of the essence of economy of effort. And actually, if you look at people resemble different dog breeds. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Some dogs and some people have a bit more kind of reverberation in them. They've got a higher RPM all the time. And then they're the bulldogs, right? Rick Rubin, right? There are these people that are just more still. And we look at these people that are more still and think, well, there probably isn't that much going on in there. But now we know from the Rick thing and the Carl thing that they're thinking a lot. But in the case of Costello, they don't get much done. Maybe Costello wanted to get things done, but if he woke up on New Year's Day and said, all right, 50 rabbits this year, he never actually achieved that. But listen, the point is, some of us sleep like bulldogs. Some of us tend to go to sleep and wake up in the middle of the night. I'm one of those people. Go to sleep 4 hours, wake up. I hate it. But I figured out that non-sleep deep rest or yoga nidra has taught me how to fall back asleep really quickly, and I can recover some sleep I haven't gotten through non-sleep deep rest. Some people are waking up in the middle of the night because they don't have their sleep timing right. We have a series on sleep coming out soon with the great Matt Walker. We recorded a 6-episode series with Matt, and he talks about something. I take no credit for this. This is Matt's acronym, QQRT, quality, quantity, regularity, and timing. You want to pay attention to the amount of sleep. Some people need 6, some people need 8. If you only got 7 for years and you're reading that you need 8 or else you'll get dementia, please don't worry about it. It is simply not the case. Some people need less, some people need more. This varies across the lifespan. Then there's the quality. How much of that sleep is continuous? Did you drink caffeine in the afternoon or alcohol in the evening, in which case the quality will be diminished? The regularity is very interesting. Going to sleep more or less, 5 nights a week at least, going to sleep more or less at the same time every night, plus or minus an hour. It's fine on the weekends. I'm not just saying that so you don't all leave at once, or a third of you leave. Some people do best by going to bed at 8 or 9 p.m. and waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning. And that's where you would feel best. In fact, if you're somebody that wakes up at 3 or 4 in the morning, you might be going to sleep too late, and you have this intrinsic chronotype, as it's called. And you can shift your clock a bit later, but most people want to go to bed sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight, wake up sometime between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., and there's great variation there too, but, QQRT. So think about the quality, the quantity, the regularity, and the timing. Once you dial those in, everything is much, much better. So much so that even if you're not getting enough sleep, as long as you're going to bed at more or less the same time each night, you'll fare better. So if you didn't do any of this stuff for years, like I didn't when I was in graduate school, et cetera, don't despair. Don't despair. It's very clear that the brain can recover, and I wouldn't waste a single moment thinking about what you didn't do. Also, my time machine's broken, your time machine's broken. I realize that doesn't create a lot of comfort, but it's unlikely that you did substantial damage. Unlikely you did substantial damage unless you did that your whole life, and we're talking about a conversation that's happening late in life. But even then, more sleep would be better. Do you believe in burnout? If so, what would be your recommendation protocol to relinquish burnout once it's already occurred? This is a very interesting question. We don't quite know what burnout is, and it can come from a combination of things. And typically, burnout comes not during the stress period, but several months afterwards. The adrenals, these two little nuggets above our kidneys and our lower back, are capable of driving so much neural energy in us that we can do all sorts of things for a very long time, even in the absence of food, as long as we have water and salt. The adrenals, because they kick out adrenaline and cortisol, and by the way, are involved in salt appetite. There's a reason for that, because you need that. The adrenals can keep us going, and there is no such thing as true adrenal burnout, because the adrenals don't burn out. You've got enough adrenaline in your adrenals for 2 lifetimes. But there is an adrenal insufficiency syndrome, so that's a real thing. It's rare, but it exists. But burnout seems to be, in my mind, more related to psychological burnout. And I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a fan of the poet David Whyte, and he has this beautiful poem that is either entitled or somehow includes the word wholeheartedness. I think that where we recover ourselves is by relating to and engaging with things and people that we wholeheartedly enjoy, even if that is simply relaxation or gardening or drawing or maybe just doing nothing for a bit. I think burnout is very real. And I think burnout, as pushed through the filter of what we've been talking about earlier in the evening, is when we are not getting periodic experiences, if you will, of delight or excitement or a sense of meaning. And here we're starting to drift into kind of abstract. Not everyone gets to do a job that they delight in. Certainly there were years where I didn't delight in the sorts of things I had to do for certain jobs. But finding some areas of life that create those neural energy states that carry forward, that wick out into other aspects of what we're doing. And I don't know if I made this point clear enough earlier, but those moments of really feeling excited about something in a way that really lights you up in particular are not just about that moment and seeking out more of those moments, but in the way that it lifts our nervous system, the way it carries us forward and allows us to do the other things that we have to do, which frankly sometimes can be not as exciting or even drudgery. So if you've burnt out, I know the feeling. I have burnt out before, and I encourage a combination of rest, but also exploration of things that can evoke that kind of internal excitement or sense of meaning. And one has to be a bit of a forager in order to do that, try new things, and that can be difficult. But burnout is real, and I encourage you to take it seriously because, unfortunately, typically what follows burnout is depression, and then things can really run ashore. What types of food do you try to eat every day, and why? Oh, I love to eat. I do. I love to eat. I even like the mere act of chewing so much. So it just, yeah. That's why I buy those Persian cucumbers. You just munch on those things all the time. I tend to eat according to how alert or asleep I want to be. It violates a few kind of popular thoughts about nutrition, but that's what I do. Generally, for me, I like water, caffeine, early in the day, and then eat sometime around 11 or noon. I'm not really strict about these things. If I'm hungry, I'll have a plate of eggs in the morning or something, or a handful of macadamias. By the way, the macadamias down in Australia are awesome. They're so good. In the States, they like infuse them with all these palm kernel oils and stuff. And so when I first tasted the ones, and they always taste good, but I'm not like going to get into the seed oil debate. I think of better ways to hang myself, like with this microphone cord. It's just like, I guess I do sort of avoid the seed oils, but I feel best. I love the macadamias. See, told you, I always find my way back. The macadamias down here taste as if they've been infused with all sorts of stuff. But then you look at the packaging and it's just like macadamias and salt. I don't know what is so good. The coffee down here is amazing. I don't know why it tastes so good. It's so good. The produce, basically I eat like you guys, gals. That's what I do. I basically eat meat and eggs and fruit and vegetables. And I do like rice and oatmeal, and like there are people on social media tell you like oatmeal is gonna kill you. And I'm like, if oatmeal were gonna kill me, I'd be dead. Like, I eat so much oatmeal, but that's not to say that some people feel better if they don't eat oatmeal. I kind of find the nutrition debates to be kind of like funny. They're so non-scientific, they're funny. But I also know that, and here I have a theory, that when you eat most of your foods from unprocessed or minimally processed sources, something magical happens. Not only are you, let's say, eating healthier foods, quote unquote, but we should define healthier. Foods for which their macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, also, and calories tend to be matched pretty well with high micronutrient content, something that doesn't exist in highly processed foods, right? But probably also better for the planet, which is great. The planet's important. We want to keep that around. But the other thing is that neurally, when you eat foods as their main ingredients, which is not to say you can't have a soup or a stew or a salad every once in a while, but closer to their original form, and I do cook my meat, unlike other people on the internet, there's the guy eating chicken raw for like 28 days. I was in the barbershop the other day. They're like, what about the raw chicken guy? And I was like, not a good idea. So when you eat foods in their kind of basic state, the brain can associate the taste with the macronutrient and amino acid content and micronutrient content. And we know that the gut is sensing a lot of that unconsciously, subconsciously. We know this through neural pathways, beautiful work being done by people here in Australia and in the States and elsewhere about the signaling for the gut is actually tasting the food, or it's measuring the amount of amino acids, fatty acids, et cetera. And so when you eat foods in their kind of more original form, non-processed or minimally processed, it's clear that the brain starts to develop a more specific intuition or appetite for what you need. You start to know, I need some fat, or I need some protein, or you start to crave the things according to what's actually in them, and highly processed foods and rich combinations of foods don't allow you to do that. So, and that hasn't really been explored. There's a little bit of work that's coming out on this by Dana Small at Yale and Kevin Hall elsewhere, but we're sort of starting to get there. So this is why I believe when people go on these elimination diets where they're like, I'm only eating meat, like the Lion diet or whatever, like Costello, meat only. And like that, many of those people, quote unquote, feel better, I think, because they're starting to form a relationship with the nutrient content of the food, the caloric content, and the taste in a way that after that they like see a cracker and they're like, no. They can kind of reset the neural circuits around appetite and all of this stuff. But for me, because I'm an omnivore, like a normal person, and sorry, no disrespect to the carnivores, I just kind of like the blood drinking, like liver chomping carnivore, like come on. Like I'm gonna catch a bullet or like someone's gonna throw a bone at me. So I fear them more than I fear the vegans. It'll just be like a bunch of, the vegans will attack you online, but in person they'll just like hit you with a parsley. So it's not as, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. I'm an omnivore, like most people, and so for me, between 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. is typically when I eat, but sometimes I eat at 9. I didn't eat before this because I don't like to eat right before I do this sort of thing, so I'll eat a meal before I go to sleep tonight. I'm not super strict about this stuff. I'm not super strict, but in general, it's some sort of intermittent-ish fasting thing, and it tends to be meat and fish and eggs and a little Parmesan cheese and coffee and oranges and cucumbers and lettuce and food, like food and pasta. And I suppose that having done that for so many years, I do, adjust it. Like if I do a hard resistance training workout, I'll eat a few more starchy carbohydrates to replenish glycogen. But I tend to avoid extremes with all of that stuff, and I love a great slice of pizza, and I've sort of lost my taste for sweets, but occasionally I'll do that, and I love vegetables like croissants and things of that sort. So, but all kidding aside, I do try and eat pretty healthy every day. With a ton of info out there about health and wellness, Andrew, I love the way, Nikhil, what are your top health and fitness style recommendations for someone who has a busy lifestyle? This is a great question, and I get accused a lot. I get accused a lot of a lot of things, but one of them is, well, no one can do all this stuff. But we talked about that earlier. We do the best with what we have and the time we have. Try and get some bright sunlight, even through cloud cover, especially through cloud cover every day. I try and dim the lights or, get under red light, not red light panel necessarily, but just put in like red party light. I've done that this whole trip when we traveled in the evening. It's just a red light bulb. It's not fancy. It's just a red light bulb, screws in this little pedestal, turn that on, all the other lights go off, and then makes for a nice easy taper into sleep because the blue in bright fluorescent lights, the short wavelength light, really is activating for the nervous system, especially late in the day. So light is a big one for me. Try and get a few walks in. I think if you were going to exercise just 2 days a week, it's very clear that those 2 days per week should include some resistance training exercise and then maybe follow up with some easy cardiovascular training or something like that. Hopefully one could get out and about maybe 3 days or exercise, sometimes not outside. One can only exercise indoors, maybe 3 days per week. So I don't think it takes a ton of time necessarily, but that might even be excessive. So with busy lifestyle, I think it's those little carve-outs of 5 or 10 minute walk. When we had Andy Galpin on the podcast and did a series, and by the way, Andy's launching his own podcast through our podcast channel, which is SciComm, which Rob and I started. He's got the Perform podcast with Andy Galpin. He talked a little bit about these exercise snacks. These are actually pretty cool in the sense that if you just take 60 seconds and do, like a near all out, run up the stairs, but be careful, or jumping jacks for a minute as fast as you can. That raises heart rate in a way and adjusts your physiology in a way that really does carry over to better performance, including even things like VO2 max in other endeavors. So it's probably not the case that that's all you should do, but even small bouts of exercise can be very, very valuable. So that's reassuring. And then I am a huge fan of non-sleep deep rest, aka yoga nidra, which means yoga sleep, which is just lying there, as we talked about before, but it's slightly different than what we were talking about for creativity. Lying there and deliberately using your mind to deeply relax the different muscles of your body, stay calm, long exhale, breathing, this kind of thing. There's a 10-minute NSDR with my voice on YouTube that you can simply find, and at zero cost. There are many with other voices, female voices, et cetera, that you can find on YouTube as well. And if you don't like those, we're soon to release on our Huberman Lab Clips channel a number of different meditations and NSDRs, again, all zero cost, of 10-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute. I would say that for limiting stress, improving sleep, and restoring mental and physical vigor, NSDR is perhaps the best tool out there. And again, I didn't create it. I simply took Yoga Nidra. I started calling it NSDR. And by the way, I was aware that I was going to upset some people when I did that. I was not trying to appropriate anything, I promise. The problem was I would talk about Yoga Nidra and studies of Yoga Nidra showing that it replenishes dopamine in the basal ganglia, can restore mental and physical vigor. And then people would back away from me slowly, like, yoga, I don't want to do yoga. And I'm like, no, this is yoga sleep. You don't actually move. And they're like, well, that sounds pretty different. And I'm like, I know it sounds different. I'd go on, and then I just decided to call it non-sleep deep rest. And when you call something what it is or what it can accomplish, you move away from nomenclature. And I have very mixed feelings about renaming things, but I figure as long as I don't call it like the Huberman protocol, at least I'm distancing myself from it, and it's a zero-cost protocol. So non-sleep deep rest is valuable for restoring mental and physical vigor. It can potentially help offset sleep that you didn't get. It can help you fall back asleep at night if you do it in the middle of the night. It can help you get better at falling asleep if you do it during the day. I did it for 20 minutes just prior to coming out here. I always do that. prior to any event or thing that requires a lot of focus, this kind of thing. Otherwise, the jokes I tell are really, just not okay. And so I do think it's quite valuable, and it's something to explore. At what age would you consider testosterone replacement therapy? Whoa. And what are the risks versus benefits of starting it sooner rather than later? We got shouts. Well, so one of the major effects of testosterone replacement therapy is spontaneous shouting out in crowds. Just kidding. There have been a number of studies of testosterone in males and females. By the way, females have more testosterone than they do estrogen. You know that, right? Per deciliter of blood, higher testosterone than estrogen. Just on average, they tend to have lower testosterone than men per deciliter of blood. So it's important in both males and females. I think you're referring, to, James, to the use of so-called TRT in males, but I'll touch on it in females as well, because low-dose TRT therapy, oops, sorry, I just did that. I get in trouble in lab if you say like PCR reaction, ATM machine. Is there a name for that? Okay. The T at the end of TRT is therapy. Testosterone replacement therapy. Testosterone replacement therapy technically means that someone's levels prior to that therapy fall outside the reference range, so lower than 300 nanograms per deciliter, typically, or some other array of symptoms, and they replace it, replacement therapy. Many, many people nowadays, in my opinion, far too many and too young, take what I call testosterone augmentation therapy, where their levels are within normal range and then they take it to get out of range. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not a cop. You do what you want to do. There are a couple things, TRT or TAT, augmentation, and here we're just setting aside high-dose steroid use, because that's just a whole other biz, and frankly, the bodybuilders will get upset, but I'll get away from you because you'll be waddling and I'll be running. That's just like a whole other business. So testosterone replacement therapy is widely used nowadays. I think far too young. Basically, it will lower your sperm count dramatically if you're a male. So if you want children, you want to conceive children, you will need to offset that by taking something like human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, which is available synthetically. They used to sell it in the form of pregnant women's urine. There was a black market for it. We could really go off into the sticks with this question. In my opinion, if you want to explore this, I would say first, get your behaviors right. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, stress control, training. Get that right. Don't train too hard or too long. Get that right. Then there are certain supplements, and we've talked about this on the podcast. Some are debated a little bit more than others. Things like zinc, tongali, et cetera, that can probably provide a boost beyond normal without shutting down the gonads. And then, and only then, if you feel you really want to do this and it's in line with your ethics, or, I don't know if you're playing a drug-tested sport, et cetera, then just minimal effective dose. And then if you want to have kids someday, or if you don't know if you want to have kids someday, make sure you're taking the appropriate things to offset that. That's basically what I would say. And the major effect of testosterone in men and women is not libido per se, and it's not aggression per se. It tends to make people more like them. If you're a jerk, you're going to become more of a jerk. If you're calm, you're going to become more calm. If you're kind, you're going to, I don't know if you become kinder, but there actually have been studies of altruistic behavior and administration of testosterone by nasal spray or other means, and frankly, people will become they'll become competitively altruistic. I think the major effect also could be described as it makes effort feel good. So we could go on and on about this. I'll just toss in that nowadays there's a lot of excitement about peptides. I'm going to do an episode about peptides. A lot of the young people I run into here and in the States are like, what are your thoughts on BPC 157? What do you think about this peptide or that peptide? Peptides are simply small proteins, amino acid chains So there are lots of things called peptides, but typically these are things that increase growth hormone. Keep in mind that anything that increases growth hormone will increase the growth of any and all tissues. So if you have a small tumor that you're not aware of, that will grow also. So just keep in mind, if you're going to tickle these pathways, you're playing with some serious biology, but there are safe ways to do it. Sorry, you said, what are the benefits of starting it sooner rather than later? Start it later. What are the physiological and practical differences between breathing techniques akin to Wim Hof and the physiological side in relation to stress, focus, et cetera? Okay, we can make this pretty straightforward. First of all, I know Wim. We go way back to 2015. I went over to the Pyrenees and visited him and hung out, and then brought him to the States. And Wim Hof breathing is tumo breathing, but in science speak, we call it cyclic hyperventilation. It's just cyclic hyperventilation. So if you inhale vigorously and long, your heart rate goes up. If you exhale vigorously and long, heart rate goes down through a process called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. The volume of the heart changes when you breathe in versus breathe out. The speed at which blood moves through the heart changes as the blood gets bigger or smaller, according to inhales and exhales. And basically, the net effect is inhale, heart speeds up a little bit, exhale, heart slows down a little bit. So if you do Wim Hof, aka tumo breathing, and you inhale vigorously and let it fall out of your mouth, and then you're going to increase heart rate, increase autonomic activation, etc. If you do a pattern of breathing like inhale, inhale, long exhale, inhale, inhale, long exhale, cyclic sighing, over time you're going to slow the heart rate down and you're going to calm down. That's just how it works. So when I hear about box breathing, or now you hear about box breathing, okay, it's relatively equal ratios of inhale, exhale. So a little bit of pause in there. That's the box. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale, hold, exhale, hold, of varying durations depending on your so-called carbon dioxide tolerance. But at the end of the day, you're maintaining kind of even heart rate when you do big cyclic hyperventilation, aka Wim Hof tumo breathing. You're increasing heart rate and autonomic arousal, release of adrenaline. Do cyclic sighing, a lot of exhales. The opposite is true.